Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, December 17th, 2024, and today we're going to talk about legume inoculation, how farms can, but already do, work together, and carbon monoxide poisoning. Yeah, so let's do it. All right, so if you are strictly a podcast listener and we're like, wait, why didn't I get my show yesterday? My apologies, and there's a absolutely reasonable explanation. I forgot to hit the publish episode button. I noticed it at about 3 a.m. this morning and went ahead and posted it. There is a whole ridiculous human element to this daily show that I do that is both challenging and amusing. Like if you were ever to hear a weird edit or the music is odd or I repeat something or any other weird quirk, that's just because it's all me at the moment. And hopefully you enjoy this ridiculously human ride we're on together. Anyway, other than that, I hope everyone is having a good week. We are inching closer to the holiday break for this show. So just a reminder that I will not be doing the daily at all next week. I have too many family obligations, but I will be back to it the week after Christmas. That said, the YouTube crowd should be on the lookout for Sunday videos. If we continue to get more support, I should be able to hire a producer in the spring, which would clear this whole taking days off business up, and forgetting to hit the publish button. That also probably would go away in theory. So that seems like a good, achievable goal. Masterfully changing gears here, per usual. The other day I was reading an article about how 12 people had died at a Georgian ski resort. Lord, I have to get better at these segues. But yes, 12 people died from suspected carbon monoxide poisoning this week in Georgia. Georgia like the country, not Georgia like the state that I don't believe has any ski resorts. To be sure, that is a wild and tragic story on its own, where apparently the power had gone out at a restaurant below where these people were sleeping, and they fired up a generator, which the New York Times story reports as being nearby, and another story from Reuters reports the generators being, quote, placed close to an indoor area, end quote. But anyway, yes, 12 people who were sleeping above this restaurant died from apparent carbon monoxide poisoning. But what I learned in reading this story was that over 80 people die per year from carbon monoxide poisoning from generators in America. Now, that's not a huge number, but it's not a small number either. That's roughly the same amount of people who die in tornadoes every year in the U.S., according to the U.S. Weather Service. Estimates range, but I read that quoting the New York Times here. Quote, Generac, the leading seller of home generators, estimates that fewer than 6% of U.S. homes have a standby generator, end quote. So for 80 people to die out of the 6% of homes who have generators is definitely not nothing. And I know many of those homes are farmer homes, so that's kind of why I thought this was relevant. And so maybe a small PSA is in order to remind you that if you're going to fire up that generator this winter or next summer, don't do it anywhere near an open door or window. Also get yourself a carbon monoxide detector. I mean, you should probably have one of those anyway if you own a gas or oil burning furnace or a charcoal grill, but definitely if you have a generator. Some of these generators can pump out carbon monoxide equivalents of hundreds of cars. So you do not want that thing anywhere near where those levels can rise indoors. And for the uninitiated, carbon monoxide has no smell or color, but is incredibly deadly. The CDC says, quote, the most common symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning are headaches, dizziness, weakness, upset stomach, vomiting, chest pain, and confusion. Carbon monoxide symptoms are often described as flu-like. If you breathe in a lot of carbon monoxide, it can make you pass out or kill you. People who are sleeping or drunk can die from carbon monoxide poisoning before they have symptoms, end quote. Also, as a side note, I find the use of the word drunk in there sort of funny. Instead of something like, I don't know, under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or sleeping medication, or I don't know, just intoxicated, because being drunk is presumably not the only thing that can make someone sleep through colorless, odorless gas. But I digress. All of that to say, my heart goes out to those poor families. And also, be careful with your backup energy this winter, y'all. Now, I did not mean to go on a 5 or so minute rant about carbon monoxide, but we run a daily show. That's just kind of how things go sometimes. Anyway, when we come back, let's get a question from our Patreon family. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil is a worker-owned co-op in Cleveland, Ohio, making NOP-compliant living soils for organic growers. Everything from Tilth is compost-based, and they divert around 4,000 tons of food scraps from landfills each year. I have used Tilth Soil for several years now for my plant starts. I love the results. I get consistent germination and consistent growth, plus excellent customer support. It's a lovably nerdy cast of folks who run Tilth. So start your season with excellent germination and strong transplants. Check out Tilth's pre-sale pricing for the 2025 season at tilthsoil.com. That's tilthsoil.com, and click Farmers. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting it over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Because I try to avoid paywalls for information, I do not do personal consultations. So if you have questions for me, Patreon is the way to get them answered. And I will answer them right here for everybody to see and hear, because I think that's fair. And I also think that's about the only way that you make any difference in the world. The revolution is not going to happen behind a paywall. Probably. Now, today's Patreon question comes from one of our beloved Susans, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Thanks so much for doing all you're doing. Love the daily content /coffee combo. My question is about pea bean inoculation. Do you /will you inoculate with specific pea/bean inoculant every single time you plant? Or will you eventually not need to use those inoculants anymore once peas and beans have been planted in every bed?" They note parenthetically, "We always use worm compost anyway to inoculate everything. Thank you." End quote. Awesome. Thanks, Susan. And awesome question. Okay, so let's talk about legume inoculation and what the idea or what the deal is with it. First, legumes are known for their nitrogen fixing capabilities, but what's really happening there is that a bacteria called rhizobia are taking up residence in tiny organs in the roots of the legumes that most of us have probably seen or can see if you're watching them on YouTube right now, called root nodules. Because nitrogen fixation must occur in low oxygen environments, rhizobia are able to use these little plant organs on legume roots to regulate the oxygen and fix the nitrogen out of the air that's in the soil. It's a super nifty little friendship these two have. Anyway, legumes are going to build those organs, and so long as there are the proper species of rhizobacteria present, either in the soil or through the intentional inoculation of the legume seeds, nitrogen fixation should occur. And there are studies that show improvements in crop yield, nitrogen fixation, protein levels, which seems reasonable because protein is made of nitrogen, and etc. So it's generally recommended that you inoculate your legumes with the recommended rhizobacteria to ensure they have the proper quantity and species of those bacteria, of rhizobia. In layman terms, you buy a packet of inoculating bacteria and you rub that on your seeds. Now, do they occur naturally in the healthy soils, these bacteria? Yes, but there is no guarantee that you have the numbers that you need to really make the legumes do their job to the highest level, and there's no easy way to test the rhizobia in your soil. I will link a good primer about all of this in the show notes, but to Susan's question of once you inoculate a field, do you have to do it again? And the answer is maybe. So many rhizobacteria will persist in the soil for many years, but will they persist in the same form is the question. Bacteria can be quite promiscuous, exchanging genes with other bacteria that may make them less viable for the same crop down the road. So it is generally recommended that you re-inoculate to maximize the nitrogen fixation. Now, with all of that out of the way, native strains of rhizobia can and should be encouraged because they have the potential to not only be more resilient and potentially more efficient, though they are significantly lower in numbers, generally speaking, than commercial rhizobia inoculant. So how do we encourage native rhizobia? Well, it's basically everything we talk about. Using good composts, like your worm casting, Susan, reducing tillage, utilizing diverse cover crop mixes with a diversity of legumes included, and etc. All of these things will help to kind of increase and promote rhizobia in the soil. All that to say that yes, the inoculated rhizobia may persist in the soil after the first inoculation, but you will likely need to inoculate every year to maximize the benefits, if that's the goal, potentially with co-inoculants as well, like trichoderma, to really get the most out of the nitrogen fixation and disease resistance, according to some interesting research that is out there. And indeed, you should consider inoculation in depleted soils, especially because they probably don't have the rhizobia to really make nitrogen fixation efficient. But following good living soil practices may help wean your soil off the need to inoculate over time. I don't know, it's going to be different for everybody's soils. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, Susan. Great question, and please keep the questions coming, Patreon members. Up next, let's talk about how existing farms can and do collaborate. Be right back.
There's nothing wrong with that. Trippy, yeah, we all lose track. I wouldn't mind it if I find it. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't have to be an acrobat. I wouldn't mind it. Should I find
Okay, so on Tuesday, we posted a conversation with Mimi Castile and myself about the wine industry. And in the middle, we both answered the question of basically, if you could do it all over, would you still farm and what would you change? And I thought this from Patreon member Mike at Think Little Farm was a great follow-up to the question. They wrote, quote, Mimi is brilliant, and hearing her speak about a different type of farming than what I'm used to and familiar with is refreshing. You both answered the would you do it again question with an answer about collaboration and exploring those avenues if you had to do it again. And of course, you pose a great solution to collaboration by way of sabbaticals on other farms, but I wonder what we as farmers can do once our farms are already well established to collaborate more. It seems, and mind you, I'm very, very new to farming, there isn't an air of cutthroatness in farming like there is in so many other professions, but is there enough good collaboration among farmers who are geographically close? And if not, what out of the box collaborative efforts can farmers, neighbor farmers to be exact, practice with each other to further the non-cutthroatness and make farming less lonely and more collaborative? And further, how can farmers make those practices work in their systems without mind-boggling amounts of time and money? Oh, that's loaded. I'm done for the moment, end quote. So great question, Mike. So generally speaking, some of the ways that small farms that already exist collaborate is through things like supplementing each other's CSA. For instance, like smaller farms will ask big farms to grow crops like squash and potatoes and such that take up loads of room on a farm so that the smaller farm can focus on higher profit crops with a lower space and time and equipment requirements. We sold garlic and garlic scapes to some friends this season, for instance, and we've sold lettuce, tomatoes, and several other crops to other farmers many times over the years. We have also bought eggs in bulk to sell to our customers and even linked our customers to meat producers for instance, turkey for Thanksgiving. Often a farm starts a small farm store and they could use products from other farms to help make their store robust. That's an easy collaboration as well. Now, obviously there's a fine line here between collaborating and just, running a normal business, normal wholesale business. But I think what brings the collaboration into focus is when there's mutual benefits. Like when you are each selling each other's goods in your farm stores or at your farmers markets, or when you are both sending out email lists that promote the other farm, when you are both maybe even helping each other with certain things, i.e. you mentioned being next door to another farm, maybe you send your crew over to help harvest the squash they grew for you, and then they send their crew over to help put up a high tunnel. Maybe you start a farm store together and put it under a different LLC. Farmers have also started co-ops similar to that, where basically everyone hires someone to organize a CSA or a co-op or an online store or whatever, and then the farmers contribute individually, sometimes under contract. There are some really cool models out there, and the Collab Farming podcast has a few of those to listen to, and I think we've interviewed a few, at least a few, on the No-Till Market Garden podcast, which you find on the No-Till Growers Network feed. To your point about the lack of cutthroatness of farming, there are areas where it exists and areas where it doesn't really. A lot of old school farmers who came up at a time when interest in local food was pretty thin, they often can maintain that attitude of every customer has to be fought over. Younger growers feel less of that because for a lot of us, when we started at the farmers markets, they were full of people and customers were not haggling over the price. But rather they were thanking us for being there, which is like a very different world than it was 20 years ago. I came up in a time of market abundance, personally, though, of course, that can and probably will change. As more and more competition comes, there will likely be more and more cutthroatness that grows. But that said, the good farmers find their niche and really treat their customers well and also their fellow farmers. So I don't expect a huge rebound of that, but we may start to see more of it over time, and maybe some growers can chime in. Maybe they're already seeing it. I don't know. There is a lot more to say about collaborations, and I don't think there is any one right way to do it. I love the idea of like cooperatives acting as an aggregate for established farms, because it's hard for established farms to just bring in partners. Like Our farm, for instance, would be worthless as a collab project. It is really difficult, limited place to grow food. We really couldn't grow over an acre or so. It just wouldn't support multiple families. I mean, not more than maybe 2. So we would have to find new land, which would mean moving, which we like where we're at for the kids, for ourselves. So it's complicated. That's partially why it belongs in the what I would do differently category and not in the what I'm going to change about my farm category. But a farm like mine, already in existence, or in an area where finding more than an acre or 2 is financially impossible, collaboration with some other farms is a fun option and perhaps the only option. Anyway, great questions, Think Little, and I'm going to close the book on this Thursday episode. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Great big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or just sign up in the month of December, you get a shout out in the show. So big shout outs today to no one. We didn't get any signups last night. We've had tons of signup this week. It just, I don't know. Wednesday wasn't the day. All good. It just means we don't get a story, which is a bummer. I like telling stories. So maybe I'll just play some sad music and we can all just appreciate that. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.